If you're mailing tax returns, Social Security appeals, Medicare paperwork, or mail-in ballots, a quiet rule change from the Postal Service just made mailing deadlines way more complicated, and if you're not aware of it, you could miss a tax deadline, delay a benefit appeal, or even risk having your ballot rejected even when you mailed everything on time. Hey everyone, it's Frank from Retirees Info. I've been helping families navigate government benefits and financial assistance for over a year. And today we need to talk about a Postal Service update that literally affects your money, your healthcare, and your right to vote all at the same time. Now, before we dive in, I want to be real with you. I've been there. I've dropped important paperwork in a mailbox right before a deadline, feeling relieved like, okay, done, I made it. I just assumed that if I mailed it on time, the postmark would match. Turns out that's not how it works anymore. And when I learned about this change, I knew I had to break it down for you because this could seriously affect people who are already struggling. Quick question before we get into it. Have you ever mailed something right at the deadline and just assumed it was fine because you sent it on time? Let me know in the comments. I'm curious how many of us have done that because honestly, we've all been there. All right, so here's the core of what's going on. For decades, most of us believed one simple thing. If you dropped a letter in a blue mailbox or handed it to a postal clerk before a deadline, the postmark would match that date. That postmark was your proof. It showed when the Postal Service accepted your mail. And legally, that date carried a lot of weight. Courts, government agencies, the IRS, election offices, they all relied on it. But starting at the end of December, the Postal Service clarified something that had technically been true for a while, but wasn't very visible to the public. The postmark date is now officially tied to when your mail is first processed by a postal facility, not when you drop it off. And that difference, even if it's just one day, can change outcomes. Now, I want to slow this down because this part trips people up. You might drop a letter in a mailbox on Monday afternoon. You did your part, right? But if that letter doesn't reach a processing center until Tuesday, that's when the postmark gets applied. So your mail could show a Tuesday postmark even though you mailed it on Monday. And in the eyes of the law, Tuesday is what counts. Let me give you a real example. You drop your tax return in the mailbox on April 15th, feeling relieved like you made the deadline, but it doesn't get processed until April 16th. That postmark now says April 16th. And suddenly your return is considered late, and being even one day late can trigger penalties if you owe taxes. So the obvious question is, why is this happening now? Honestly, it comes down to how the Postal Service operates today versus how it used to operate years ago. Mail doesn't get stamped at your local post office anymore. In most cases, postmarks are applied at large regional processing and distribution centers. And over the past few years, USPS has been consolidating those centers as part of its Delivering for America plan. The Postal Service has been trying to stabilize its finances and modernize operations. Letter mail volume has dropped a lot over the years, while package delivery has exploded, so they've reduced transportation routes, closed or merged some processing facilities, and changed how often mail moves from local offices to those big centers. Here's a detail that really surprised me. Research shows that many post offices that used to send mail to processing centers twice a day now only send it once, often in the morning. That means if you drop mail off later in the day, it may sit overnight or even longer if a weekend or holiday is involved. And some post offices are hundreds of miles away from their assigned processing center. So yeah, that delay before processing is becoming more common. From the Postal Service's perspective, they say this isn't a brand new rule. It's more of a clarification. They argue that postmarks were always about processing, not drop-off, and now they're just being more explicit about it. They also point out that customers who need certainty still have options. You can go to the counter and ask for a hand-applied postmark, or you can use certified mail, registered mail, or get proof of mailing. But here's where things get real for everyday life. Let's talk about who needs to pay the closest attention here. Seniors who are still mailing Social Security appeals, Medicare forms, or tax returns. This matters for you. Organizations like AARP have already warned that this difference between drop-off date and postmark date is likely to become more common, not less. And older Americans are more likely to rely on mailed forms, especially for Medicare appeals or Social Security paperwork. Veterans who are submitting VA benefit paperwork or appeals through the mail, you need to hear this. People with disabilities who rely on mail for time-sensitive benefit forms, stay with me. Anyone who votes by mail, no matter who you vote for, this could affect whether your ballot counts. And honestly, if you're someone who still pays bills by mail, about 13% of households do, this matters for you too. One late payment because of a postmark delay could hurt your credit score. Let's talk about taxes for a minute, because this is where a lot of people could get burnt. The IRS treats your tax return as filed on time if it's postmarked by the deadline, usually April 15th. So imagine you mail your return on April 15th, feeling relieved, but it doesn't get processed until April 16th. That postmark now says April 16th, and suddenly your return is considered late. And even being one day late can trigger penalties if you owe taxes. The late filing penalty can be 5% of what you owe per month, up to 25%. There's also a late payment penalty and interest that adds up daily. Even charitable donations can be affected. If you mail a donation on December 31st, but it's postmarked January 2nd, that donation might count for the next tax year, not the one you expected. Now, some people might say, well, who still mails tax returns anyway? But here's the thing. Millions of people do. Around 10 million tax returns are still filed on paper each year. And for a lot of seniors, this isn't about preference. It's about comfort and access. Speaking of seniors, this change really matters for Social Security and Medicare too. A lot of forms, appeals, and deadlines in those systems are strict. Miss a deadline, and your appeal could be denied automatically. That could delay benefits, coverage, or even access to care. And if you're relying on the mail and trusting the old assumption about postmarks, you could be caught off guard. Social Security appeals have time limits. Medicare appeals have time limits. If you mail something on the deadline day, but it doesn't get postmarked until the next day, you could lose your right to appeal. And for people who depend on those benefits to survive, that's devastating. Now let's talk about voting, because this is where emotions tend to run high, but I'm going to stick to just the facts. Mail-in voting became much more common during the pandemic. And while it's come down since then, it's still a major part of elections. Right now, 14 states allow ballots to be counted if they arrive after Election Day, as long as they're postmarked by Election Day. So, imagine someone drops their ballot in the mail on Election Day thinking they're doing everything right, but the ballot doesn't get processed until the next day. That postmark could make the ballot invalid in those states, and that's not hypothetical. State officials in places like California and Oregon have already warned voters, especially those who live far from processing centers, to mail ballots earlier than they might expect. This all comes at a time when mail-in voting is under intense political scrutiny. President Donald Trump has been vocal about restricting mail-in voting. The Postal Service insists this postmark clarification is operational, not political. Still, critics argue that any change increasing the risk of ballots being rejected deserves serious attention. So then what do you actually do with all this information? Because I don't want this to just sound alarming, there are practical steps you can take. First, mail important documents earlier than you think you need to build in a buffer, especially around weekends and holidays. If something's due on the 15th, mail it on the 10th if you can. Second, if timing really matters, go inside the post office and ask for a hand-applied postmark. It's free, and it gives you clear proof of the date. Don't just drop it in the mailbox. Walk inside, hand it to a clerk, and ask them to hand stamp it. That stamp is your insurance. Third, consider certified or registered mail for critical documents. Yes, it costs more, but it creates a paper trail. You'll get a tracking number and proof of when it was mailed and when it was delivered. Fourth, when possible, use electronic filing for taxes and many government forms. Online submission gives you instant confirmation. The IRS has free e-filing options. Many Social Security and Medicare forms can be submitted online now too. Fifth, if you vote by mail, request your ballot as early as your state allows. Don't wait until the last week, and if possible, drop it off at an official ballot drop box instead of mailing it back. That way you know it's received on time. I know this feels like another thing to keep track of, and that's frustrating. For generations, the postmark was something you didn't have to think about. It was just there quietly doing its job, and now the responsibility shifts a bit more onto you. But here's the thing, this isn't about blaming the Postal Service or blaming the government. This is about understanding how the system works now so you can protect yourself. Because the people who don't know about this change are the ones who are going to get hurt by it. At the end of the day, the key takeaway is simple. The date you mail something and the date it's postmarked are no longer guaranteed to be the same. That one shift can affect your money, your benefits, and your voice in an election. But knowing this gives you power. It lets you plan ahead, protect yourself, and avoid unnecessary problems. You're not helpless in this. You just need to adjust your strategy a little bit. And honestly, that's what this channel is all about. Giving you the information you need to navigate these systems even when they feel like they're working against you. If this video helped you understand what's changed with postmarks and deadlines, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I post new videos every week about benefits, assistance programs, and changes that affect low-income families. Drop a comment and let me know. Have you ever mailed something right at the deadline and assumed it was fine? Are you going to start using hand-applied postmarks now? I read every single comment, and your experiences help other people in this community. And if you know someone who still mails tax returns, benefit forms, or votes by mail, please share this video with them. The more people who know about this change ahead of time, the fewer people will get caught off guard. Check out my other recent videos on January Social Security updates and new SNAP update. Links are in the description. Remember, we're all in this together. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other.